That is your role. That has always been your role. This has been a peaceful committee until you intervene. And that is how you speak to your colleague. Get out of here.
You said
very eloquent. Very eloquent. You're not going to bully us. You are not going to bully us. Canadians are going to hear from the witnesses, and we demand that.
Dr. Lewis.
This is your wake-up call.
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
I believe that it's of critical importance for us to deal with the motion because it is central to this committee's work and the ability to adequately investigate this Mckinsey connection to the infrastructure bank. Therefore, I would like to move the following motion, which has been circulated to the members of this committee. Pursuant to Standing Order 1081 and 2, in relation to the committee study examining the role of McKinsey and Company in the creation and the beginnings of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, CIB. A, summonses be served on Dominic Barton, past Global Managing Director of McKinsey and Company, Andrew Pickersgill, past Managing Partner of the Canadian practice of McKinsey and Company, Janice Fakasua, inaugural board chair of the CIB, Michael Sabia, past board chair of the CIB and past member of the Advisory Council on Economic Growth, Bruno Guillemette, past interim chief investment officer and board director of the CIB, and Tamara Vrooman, board chair of the CIB, requiring each of them to appear at the dates and times to be fixed by the chair by no later than May 11th, 2023. And the committee strongly urges Annie Ropar, past chief financial officer of the CIB, and the Honorable Dominic LeBlanc, Minister of Infrastructure, to appear no later than May 11, 2023. Now, after the Conservatives served this motion on Friday, this motion to compel the testimony, I understand that Ms. Ruman has now accepted this committee's invitation to appear and that Andrew Pickersgill at McKinsey has requested that his McKinsey colleague Rob Poulter appear before him. I'm happy to amend the motion, Mr. Chair, to remove Ms. Ruman's name, and we can also discuss whether we would like to remove Mr. Pickersgill if his colleague appears before him. Also, after Conservatives made it clear that they will, that these witnesses will answer to the committee, I understand that the current and former Liberal cabinet ministers and others at the Infrastructure Bank and McKinsey executives are also currently open to coming and checking their schedules. Let me say for the record, Mr. Chair, that until Conservatives gave notice of their intention to summons these key witnesses, we had a complete lockout of all the current and former board chairs, the directors of the Infrastructure Bank, including Mr. Michael Sabia, who is currently the Deputy Minister to the Finance Minister, Minister Chrystia Freeland. In essence, the people with key knowledge of this study about McKinsey's contracts at the bank were not participating. I also want to restate and reiterate that this committee agreed to study this issue unanimously. We consented to this study because of deep connections that McKinsey and Company has with the Canada Infrastructure Bank from its inception. We also recognize broader issues, including the reliance on external consultants by this government. The government also awarded $22 billion in contracts to outside consulting firms to do work which is clearly part of the public service's core responsibilities. Overall, these high-priced consultants cost Canadians $1,400 a year to every Canadian household. These decisions have led to a demoralized public service, and this has resulted in one of the largest public service strikes in Canada's history. The bank was created on the recommendation of the former Mckinsey Global Managing Partner, Dominic Barton. Thereafter, we know that contracts in the amount of $1.4 million, non-transparent contracts, sole source contracts, were awarded to Mckinsey. Several Mckinsey people were also hired at the bank, including the current CEO. This is a taxpayer-funded bank, and Canadians deserve answers of transparency. That is why I am frankly astonished that this committee has put out over a dozen invitations to key people who have worked for the Infrastructure Bank, who have served on its board, or who have been ministers of this bank, and we have not seen them respect those invitations to provide answers to Canadians. How we as a committee can complete this study and investigate the role of McKinsey in the creation and the beginning of the bank when those who were around at the time, who were directly involved, are refusing to come and testify at this committee. It is extremely disconcerting that these witnesses, most of whom are paid by taxpayers, are refusing to come. It is shocking that these taxpayer-funded witnesses are refusing to appear before a parliamentary committee to provide answers to Canadians with regards to the bank's business dealings with McKinsey. These are taxpayer-funded executive, board chairs, hired consultants who are paid six-figure salaries, who don't think that they even have to answer to a parliamentary committee. This is exactly why we have a problem with this bank. This committee studies shows why Canadians have a problem with this bank. The lack of transparency of this bank on contracts, on hiring, on salaries, on its project agreements, on its financing arrangements, and on providing accurate information to Parliament on the status of current projects is why we have a problem with this bank. All of these things are an affront to transparency. Canadians expect and deserve more from the institutions that they fund. We have and had already canceled one meeting because of this lack of cooperation, Mr. Chair. That canceled committee meeting cost taxpayers. We lost valuable time as a committee to do the work that Canadians expect us to do. Accountability starts at the top. Leaders are required to show up, especially leaders who earn six-figure salaries. Those whom Canadians elect and held to the highest, should be held to the highest standards. They earn more money than the average Canadian taxpayer who are paying their salaries. That is why it is even more disencouraging to members of this committee and as an elected member of this House to see that this unacceptable tone is coming from the top. Why is it that we have to strongly urge the current Minister of Infrastructure to show up and answer for his leadership on this bank? Why are all of the previous ministers on this file, which has been a revolving door of ministers, are not willing to answer questions about the government's flagship infrastructure policy and how it has been executed? It's clear they are afraid of transparency and they are afraid of the hard questions. If they have nothing to hide, they should come and they should come willingly. Let me list the current and former elected officials who have not agreed to appear before this committee and answer questions on their ties with the Infrastructure Bank and Mckinsey. Current Minister Dominic LeBlanc, no response. Former Minister Amarjeet Sohi, minister who brought in the Infrastructure Bank, declined. Former Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne, no response. I will say to her credit that the former minister, Catherine McKenna, has agreed to appear, and she is the exception in this entire group of Liberal cabinet ministers. But this utter disregard and lack of accountability is a trend that starts at the top. Furthermore, this lack of cooperation is an affront to the authority of this committee and an affront to Parliament. In closing, I sincerely hope that those whom we have invited to testify will come to committee because they have first-hand knowledge of the beginnings of the bank and its contracts with Mckinsey. Unfortunately, at this point, we are already looking at canceling the next meeting of this study because of the lack of cooperation from this government and from this bank. We need key witnesses, former bank chairs, executives with both the bank, the Canada Infrastructure Bank, McKinsey, to cooperate to get to the bottom of this issue. But if they do not come voluntarily, it is fully within this committee's authority and entirely appropriate to adopt a motion to summons the key witnesses that will allow this committee to truly investigate the issues and to keep the publicly funded bank accountable. Those are my respectful submissions. I suspect that other members of this committee may also have something to say about my motion. Thank you.
Well, another day, another conspiracy theory by the Conservatives. I'm very pleased to be here on this committee today to see that the Conservatives have not lost their ability to invent scandals where one doesn't exist and to call this an affront to transparency. I would suggest it's an affront to reality. The fact is, while Dr. Lewis was talking about how there's a refusal of witnesses, a refusal to conduct this study, we have witnesses here, sitting here, ready to answer questions. But instead of answering those questions and talking about the Infrastructure Bank, the Conservatives would rather spend time creating clickbait, and probably will attempt to fundraise and make money on the clickbait that they would rather create rather than ask the questions of the witnesses sitting right here today. So the only affront that we have here today is to reality within the Conservative Party, because how can anybody suggest that there is not any transparency while you have witnesses here? Sorry, excuse me, I have the floor, and I'd appreciate.
During when I
excuse me,
and
I have the floor.
You came here deliberately to cause conflict. That is your role. That has always been your role.
Parliament.
This has been a peaceful committee until you intervene, and that is how you speak to your colleague. Get out of here.
You said
very eloquent.
You said
very eloquent. You're not going to bully us. You are not going to bully us. Canadians are going to hear from the witnesses, and we demand that.
Dr. Lewis, Ms. O'Connell had the floor. I think we can all respect each other. It's the standard practice here in this committee. Let's not bring what's occurring in other committees into this room.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's absolutely disrespectful to suggest that I, as a member of Parliament, can't sit here, and to come to this committee is to simply disrupt. Excuse me, I have every right to be here as anybody else, and if the member opposite can't control herself, then I think we're going to have a very long day.
I just want to make it clear at the outset, we're not going to tolerate that in this meeting. When somebody is speaking, nobody else will speak.
Will she be admonished or tell me to get out of here?
Dr. Lewis, she did not speak when you spoke.
But will she be admonished for telling
And
me
I
to
can
get
tell
out of
you,
here?
based on her facial expressions, she did not appreciate what you said, but she did not interrupt you.
But
And
if she- if
and
she
that's the
did-
kind of respect that I expect every member to show ech other in this room. Thank you.
While I was speaking, Chair.
Ms. O'Connell did not, and if you feel that you're being disrespected, please bring that to the chair, and I will take action to address it.
I'm bringing it to the chair right now. Chair, I was told as a member, as an elected official,
Yes.
to get out of here. I would like her admonished for telling me to get out of here.
If that
I
happens
have a
again
right to
and you
be-
see that the
I
chair
was
has not
elected-
taken action, then I will take action because I want to defend your right to speak in this room. It is your right, Dr. Lewis.
Yes.
But
Chair?
but instead of doing that, you've decided to do exactly what you are now complaining about against Ms. O'Connell, and I'm not going to tolerate that in this room. When you speak, I will make sure that nobody else speaks when you speak. When Ms. O'Connell speaks, I will make sure she has the right to speak. That's the way we're going to work things in this room. So can we proceed? We have important work to do today. She has the floor. If you'd like to speak again, I will gladly put your name down after Mr. Stroll.
Mr. Chair, I'd like an opportunity to respond to you. Mr. Chair, I was elected by the residents of Halderman, Norfolk, to be in this room, to defend taxpayers, and another member told me, an elected official, to get out of here, saying that I don't have a place in this room. She came and she has disrespected not only Canadian taxpayers, but the entire residency of Halderman, Norfolk, by telling an elected official to get out of the committee room. I was told to get out of here. I would like her admonished for that unparliamentary behavior before we proceed.
Dr. Lewis, if you heard those words coming out of her mouth, which I did not.
Get out of here.
Until you...
You know, we've heard this, there's trying to create a scandal where one doesn't exist before. I recall hearing that before the SNC-Lavalin scandal. We were told to just shut our mouths and trust the government and that everything was fine, and we know how that turned out. I do think there is a bit of gaslighting here, where where a member tells conservatives that they're peddling, that they're being silenced while saying that this is conspiracy theories. We're telling another female member of parliament to stop making a fuss, referring to them being insane, the ridiculousness of this all, etc. This is, quite frankly, an attempt to shut down a legitimate motion that is in order, that was tabled before this committee as a result of, quite frankly, in the middle of last week, we had to cancel the Thursday meeting because no one would agree to come and participate in this study. Subsequent to that, Dr. Lewis wrote a letter to the chair and the clerk outlining our concern with that, raised the matter in the House, raised the matter by motion, and suddenly there was a lot of people that had said no that said yes.